This conference will now be recorded.
I do this so that I can post it on our internal site, and thereby people that weren't able to make it can go back and listen to it at a different time they're choosing. So that's the purpose. We won't use it against you, I promise. Well, I won't. I assume nobody in the neighborhood will either. All right. Well, we don't have. So let me first make a couple of announcements. First of all, I'm going to apologize. We had some malfunctions in the invitation on OCA. For some reason, the invitation got corrupted. I found out about it over the weekend, and Leslie and John were kind enough to fix it over the beginning of the week. So I don't see Leslie, so I'll thank you. John Lazo, you're not there. So I'll thank you both. And John, you are there. I'll thank you, John, in person, um, uh, and Leslie in abstention. Uh, the second thing I want to announce is I call it a disclosure, whatever you want to call it. When I first was suggested that we invite Elaine, I thought of Elaine as Secretary of State and that she was going to be addressing questions that we would have of the Office of Secretary of State. I also ignorantly assumed that Secretary of State in North Carolina was like Secretary of State in the United States, where it's an appointed position, not an elected position. I was then corrected and told that there is in fact an election for the Secretary of State. And I then tried to find how to contact Mr. Sykes to invite him to meet with us. And I was having a lot of difficulty getting through. I eventually did get through at 10:30 this morning. So the first actual contact I had with the Sykes offices were this morning at 10:30. That's why many of you saw in the invitation announcement that I had not gotten a call back. I had in fact written, somebody else wrote, and we just didn't get a call back. It turns out that the message went to his wife, Susan. Susan forwarded it off to somebody else, and for some reason that message never got back to me. At any rate, I want you to know that a couple of things. First of all, we will hear from Mr. Sykes and his campaign. I just haven't wanted to get down with the leadership of politics and culture to try and find an appropriate way to do that. I would like to be able to ask Elaine not to speak as a candidate today, but rather to speak as Secretary of State to answer our questions about the business of Secretary of State as it applies to election law and business and any other questions that may have come up or will come up. And then we're going to talk about another fair way to appropriately balance presenting the candidacy of both of these people running for Secretary of State. Is everyone okay with that and understanding? And I apologize for the misunderstanding. This was not an intended slight. It was not an intended omission. It was just the way things happened. Okay. So with that, I'm going to thank Elaine Marshall, our current Secretary of State, for addressing us today and answering a nice long list of questions which you have submitted to us. And rather than describe the position of Secretary of State, unless Elaine, you want to say a few non-political words in the beginning about the office, you know what the questions are. If you want to say that, or if you think the questions will answer the questions, what we need to know about the Office of Secretary of State. Your turn.
Well, I'd rather talk about the office first and then answer the questions. Just like you had a confusion about whether it was elected or appointed, there are many, many misunderstandings about the Secretary of State's office. We are not cookie cutters from one state to the next. As you know, some are appointed, some are elected. Some do elections and some don't. I am one who does not do elections, but have extensive knowledge and have been well prepared to answer the questions that folks have about elections, because I'm considered a credible source for those kinds of things. The Secretary of State's office in North Carolina is actually older than the state, because when the King of England was running this colony of the Carolinas, he wanted a public record keeper. So he appointed a colonial Secretary of State colonial governor to run the things. Well, the first Secretary of State never made it from jolly old England, but the second one, they appointed somebody who was here or came over here, what have you. So this office is actually older than the state itself. It has been elected in North Carolina since after the Civil War, and I am the 15th Secretary of State since that time. So if you divide 15 into that, you can see that Secretary of State stay around for a while, and I'm not the longest serving. My predecessor, two ahead of me, was Mr. Thad Ure, 56 years in one office in North Carolina. So for people that grew up in North Carolina, they've heard the name Mr. Thad Ure, and he was a character. And I'm sorry, I'm not a character. I just am who I am. But that's a little bit of history of the office. And most part of what we do is a public record keeper. We are the honest broker to keep certain records that are public information according to the North Carolina General Assembly. Those are business records. Those are, well, I jokingly say if they don't know where to put something, if it doesn't easily fit into something like agriculture or insurance or healthcare, we get it. Even if it somehow doesn't seem to fit in with what we do. We're very good database managers, and the state relies upon us for that. The main mission of the Secretary of State's office is to support business development, the creation of business, the facility of movement of capital, and the creation of capital. What am I saying when I say that? And also some consumer protection. We're the place where business begins. Corporations, LLCs, nonprofits, and some other alphabet soup kind of things like PLLCs and certain other more sophisticated partnerships are formed there. Not all businesses are formed with us because you don't have to be a business entity. You can be a sole proprietor, and only thing you register then is your assumed name of how you're going to do business. So not all businesses there, but most businesses there. And boy, have we seen an uptick in business formations. I can talk about that a little bit later. The second big thing that we do is banks and other financial institutions file their documentation with us to show what they have loaned money on, their secured property. We see if you borrow on a piece of land, it's going to be recorded at the Register of Deeds. If you borrow and pledge on a motor vehicle with the title, it's on the title. But if you pledge property that doesn't have a document like that, how do you secure it if you're the lender? Bingo, you file with the Secretary of State's office. Some of our greater filers are Ford Motor Credit, John Deere Motor Credit, things like lawn mowers and all kinds of office equipment and all types of manufacturing equipment. And it doesn't even have to be something you can see and identify that you can give a security interest in. Shopping centers that are coming up, they will pledge their rental proceeds for the next 10 years or 20 years to pay off the big construction loan. So you don't have that money yet, but it's a stream of money that's going to be coming in. The same is true with movies that get filmed here. We're not doing nearly as many now as we did at one time, but the rents and profits, the royalties from those films are secured by a lender within the state. So people, we've got some extensive databases. We don't know how much money was borrowed, but we do know what was pledged, and it ranges from a herd of cows all the way up to some of the most sophisticated manufacturing equipment you can ever imagine in this world. Car dealerships, appliance stores, all inventory financing, floor planning, it's commonly known as, is filed with us. So that's a very active unit. My third big unit is securities. I regulate all the stockbrokers and investment advisors that have a client here in North Carolina. Some of you may be retirees. Some of you may have come from another state. And perhaps you had an investment advisor that you liked a lot, and just upon moving to North Carolina, you did not want to sever that relationship. It's a trusted relationship and you're happy with it, I assume. So that stockbroker then, or investment advisor, has to register when they have one single client in a particular state, and every state has the same law. So we have about 200,000 investment advisors registered in North Carolina, but most of them are out of state. We've got a good bunch here, but a lot of them are out of state. So I have regulatory authority. Over some of the divisions I have administrative civil remedies, but I also am a boutique attorney general. I have law enforcement authority. In the areas of trademarks, we register trademarks for North Carolina businesses. but we protect any mark out there. It could be Colgate toothpaste, which we have found fake Colgate toothpaste. It could be Black & Decker or other electrical appliances, General Electric. It can be fake prescriptions, which is a conversation we can have a little bit later on. Anything that can be faked, if we can make it, somebody else can fake it. And so we have a grand total of 3 law enforcement officers that report directly to me for a state of like 1.4 million people. Well, that wasn't going to work very well. I figured out a long time ago when I only had 1 law enforcement officer. So we created a force multiplier. I currently have about 140 law enforcement officers spread out all over the state who have a memorandum of understanding from their unit, whether it's the sheriff's office or the police department, to be on our task force, our anti-counterfeiting task force. We have trainings twice a year. The manufacturers of these products come in and help these law enforcement officers to identify a fake from a real one. And we have very good support from the manufacturers of these products. We have pulled off the market hundreds of thousands of dollars worth. Well, we had a $50 million case in Chapel Hill that I'll recite to you just a little bit. We had word that some fake Cartier jewelry was coming into the United States. It came in through the port of New Orleans and was working its way up, and a big load of it was being delivered to North Carolina, $50 million worth. We followed it from the delivery hub where it came in to the place. We knew the address. It had already been cased out. This guy was operating out of a street front church. He happened to be the pastor. And the first delivery was equal in retail value. That's how all trademark work is done, in retail value at $25 million. And I thought, well, we've had the biggest one-day bust we've ever had. Then he got a lawyer because he got charged. And that lawyer called up my staff and said, by the way, there is another delivery of stuff that's here that's now at my office. Would you come by and pick it up? And so we went to his office and we got another $25 million worth of fake Cartier bracelets and things like that. And I thought, wow. So then another month after that, that same lawyer called up and said, by the way, I have a smaller package that you might be interested in. And that was about $1 million worth of Cartier at retail value bracelets. So that case hasn't come to trial. It was a Chapel Hill, Orange County case, and it got written up in the paper, and you may hear about it later. But people that put toxic things into cosmetics, perfumes, unsanitary bacteria, we have analyzed, we've sent it off, that's in cosmetics and perfume property, components of perfume, and fake medicines are really one thing that really get my hackles up. People frequently will buy online, making their money stretch, or nowadays nobody wants to leave the house in COVID times, and the medicine comes to them. Now, I'm not talking about a company that has said you must use this mail order house to get your medicines. That's kind of a closed circuit. But if you are searching online for blood pressure or some other medication that has been prescribed for you and you're trying to make ends meet, there are wonderful sites that say they're Canadian pharmacies when really, in fact, they are not. They may be transshipped from Canada under circumstances that you can't tell how they were handled. You don't know how they were manufactured. And we have even had here in America, not in North Carolina to the best of my knowledge, but in America, a case where late-stage cancer drug Avastin was delivered from a company that was actually called Montana Drugs, but was coming from Canada. Just serious, serious harm for people who are expecting quality medicines. If in America, if we plug it in the wall or take it in our body, we expect it to be legitimate, and we expect it to do what the doctor thinks it's supposed to do for us. So later in questions and answers, I can explain to you a tool that we have to help you identify those. So also investor protection, since stockbrokers and scams, Bernie Madoff is not the first nor the last person that ever attempted a scam. So we've got, and he's a new North Carolina resident, kind of. We deal with everything from brokers who go rogue just to the flat out crooks that never intended to be legitimate in the first place. We frequently get long prison sentences for these folks. The sad thing is that preventing the crime is the number one way to deal with it, because frequently, and the sad part is that we don't get the investors' money back, certainly not a large percentage of it, because part of the scam thing is looking credible, giving charitable donations, doing good works in the community, nice car, nice clothes, church contributions, Boy Scout contributions, all that kind of stuff that looks good to the community. When in fact it's your investment money that's not being handled properly that is their charitable gift. So we work a lot with federal prosecutors on this, and I have staffers on my staff that are cross-designated to try cases in federal court, which most folks have never heard of, but I take it as a mark of credibility for the staff that I've pulled together, that my folks can go into federal court and actually prosecute cases as the lead attorney or second attorney, but lots of times the lead attorney, because they know the best in these cases in federal court. So that in a nutshell is what my office is all about. And we'll be happy to move on to questions. I can talk about the office all day long if you push the talk button and I can go.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. So these are the questions that by and large came in from residents. I'm saying by and large because I wrote some of them. I'm not going to attribute any of them so that, because I didn't ask anyone's permission. So here we go. It looks like North Carolina is a little different from other states in that we have a state board of election appointed by the governor. What is the role of Secretary of State in the election process?
My role in the election process is, well, the role of the Secretary of State's office frequently is to certify. We are the bells and whistles to say that something is bona fide North Carolina. This has a lot to do with international commerce. It has a lot to do with people adopting babies. It has a lot to do with students going abroad. It has a lot to do with ISO standards that are required, or non-pesticide use standards that are required for things to go into international commerce. If we didn't do this, the people would have to go to the embassy of whatever country the document needs to go to. So we're the intermediary for that here in North Carolina. I certify election results. Election results are given to me by the Board of Elections, the group that is charged with conducting elections and registering voters. And I also play a role that I am the convener of the Electoral College, which will be Monday, December, I think the date's 14th. We have a ceremony in the old House Capitol building. By Constitution, that's an old building that's not very, user-friendly for these days, but I can't move it because it's in the Constitution that I have it there. So I guess they thought they would always use that building forever and forever, and it would be large enough, and it's not. But that's where it is. So my election duties are small. Now, because the name is Secretary of State, right now, my call center is under assault. You probably all have gotten a letter of some sort that said, from some advocacy group that said, call your Secretary of State and tell them X, Y, Z, or call your Secretary of State and ask. That happens, and my staff is not equipped per se to answer these questions because they are complex questions and answers. In fact, in the last week, in talking with some of my call center people, they have felt abused by some of the public because the public doesn't like hearing that it's another agency. We can forward your call, but I have dealt with that for the whole time I've been Secretary of State. I get nasty emails. I get positive emails, but more on the complaint side or questioning side. And we have to refer all of them for the state's answer over to the State Board of Election.
Thank you very much. Next question is, in North Carolina, who is responsible for making sure that we have free and fair elections?
The State Board of Elections is that entity, and I would like all of you to write down a website for them. They have a new revised website. It is very good. It is ncsbe.gov. ncsbe.gov. .gov is limited to government entities. If you go to some other sites trying to give you election information, I would not rely upon them. I have looked at some recently myself that, like Stephen Colbert, the entertainer, has a thing about voting, and sports people are putting up things about voting. I went through it and I checked North Carolina, and it linked over to ncsbe.gov. Colbert's linked over. So, there's more than one way to get to it, but in my mind, the best way is just go straight to it rather than depending upon some other linkage. There's reasons that might not be true. That board is operated by a 5-person board, and the majority of that board is of the party that is in the governor's mansion. It's always 3-2, and the chairman is from the party that's in the governor's mansion. So it's funny. The person that gets those positions and the leadership of that organizations are by law required not to participate in political activities. Free speech concerns, they can give minimal amounts to a candidate, but that's about the extent of their free speech that most of them feel is appropriate. And most of them don't even do campaign contributions because it just invites trouble. My colleagues, secretaries of state, a lot of them do elections, and so I am privy to a lot of discussions about federal law, state law, the challenges that they're facing right now. I probably get 30 text messages a day from secretaries of state talking to each other about what to do about this, what to do about that, lawsuit filed, how, just on and on and on. I'm just a bystander on that, but by the process of osmosis and my own practical experiences, I've learned an awful lot. I've just had to bone up on election law because it comes my way whether I want it or not.
Thank you very much. What process is in place to prevent voting in person and also using a mail-in ballot?
Okay, there is a brand new feature. It's been used by other states because I've met these people at the National Secretary of State meeting, but this is the first year that North Carolina has used it. It is called Ballot Tracks, BALLOTTRAX, and that's all pushed together into one word, BALLOTRAX, Ballot Tracks. If you go to that website, ncsbe.gov, you can get a whole variety of information. And there you can track your ballot. I haven't done it yet because I'm going to vote in person early, so I haven't actually had the experience of operating it. But you put in your name and it will tell you when the ballot is sent out from your county board of election. And then it says when it's arrived at the address you gave them to send it to. And then when you put it in the mail, it shows it moving back, and it lets you know when it got back at the Board of Elections. Okay, the process for not double voting, if you know that your ballot has come back, there would be no need for you to even think about going down to try to vote. If your ballot has not come back, you now have a change. You need to understand the law. If your ballot has not come back, but you mailed it ahead of Election Day, it has until the 6th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, the 6th of November at 5 o'clock to be in. So there's a 3-day grace period from the Election Day Tuesday to Friday, provided your ballot has a postmark on it. So if it's gotten tied up in the ballot, the post office's problems, I guess I'll just call them that, you have that grace period. And there's a new ruling from the Board of Elections that says, if you notice, sometimes a lot of mail you get does not have a postmark on it. And in COVID days, you may not want to go to the post office and demand that they put a postmark on it. That kind of defeats staying in quarantine. But you can tell from ballot tracks, and ballot tracks will be evidence that you have mailed it. And if that is evident to the Board of Elections, they're not going to let you vote on Election Day if they've got it. And so there's the question about the the time in between, but they will disqualify one of the ballots. They will not let you vote twice.
Okay, thank you. I might say I did test the system, Elaine, when I heard you tell me about it. And within a week from the time I dropped it in our kiosks out in front of my house, it had arrived at the Durham election
Great.
office.
I'm glad to hear that.
So
Very
it
glad.
worked. It worked great. It worked great. I wanted to give myself enough time so if there was a problem, I could go in and vote a different way. That was a
Sure.
note of encouragement to all of us. Okay. That answer, that you answered another question. Which mail-in ballots will be counted and why will some be rejected?
Okay, there are about 3 questions that kind of dovetail on this. In the ballot application process, when you ask for an absentee ballot, that form, in my mind, isn't quite as thorough as it needs to be to help you as a voter. It says that your address and your name and all are required. There are 3 lines that have a red star beside it and they're required. Then when you go down to line 5, it does not have the mark that says it's required. Line 5 is for you to give a telephone number or an email address. The law is that if your ballot, when it comes back, does not meet the requirements to be accepted, they are to contact you to help you fix it or to tell you what the problem is. But if you haven't provided the contact information, that becomes harder. Okay, that's problem number 1. North Carolina, unfortunately, has had a history of ballots, absentee ballots, not being counted, up to 10% in the 2016 election and the 18 election. Unfortunately, a large percent of those are African Americans. When you send your ballot request in, you get back the ballot and a ballot envelope. You fill out the ballot with a witness not close enough to see who you're voting for, but close enough to see that you are filling out the ballot. Then you stick it in the envelope. And then on the outside of the envelope, there's a place for you to sign. That is one of the reasons that ballots get rejected. They're not taken right away. The second reason is that the witness must sign, print their name, and their address in there. That is the other major reason there's some defect with what the witness is doing. And part of this is policy, and part of this is settlement of some law cases, challenges that have been made. As it stands right now, the Board of Elections can send you an affidavit rather than sending you back a new ballot. That used to be the old system, send back a new ballot. They can send you a form for you to say, let's assume the witness signed but didn't put their address in. Then you can put in, the voter can correct and put in the witness's address and print their name. Now, if the witness hadn't signed at all, then you need a new one or get that one back because you got to have a witness signature on there. All of those things are possible. There were challenges made to our existing law because of COVID restrictions, because people are concerned about going to vote. Now, let's talk about another thing about absentee ballots. You can get that absentee ballot and you can return it yourself or have a near relative return it to you. On the Board of Elections site, it says you can drop it off. Well, it's a more complicated process than dropping it off. You have to sign it in essence. So there's a movement afoot, and part of another lawsuit is to have drop boxes, which the Board of Election is opposed to, and that's not part of the settlement. Not even controlled, supervised drop boxes. The question for some of them is, can they have tents outside so you don't have to go into the Board of Elections, or when early vote starts, you can take these ballots back to an early vote site. And again, that website will tell you how many early vote sites there are in Durham. It's just kind of like a Google map. Give you directions. It'll tell you how many square feet it is. It'll tell you how big the parking lot is. Durham went over the hill in giving good information. Some counties have not done that quite a thorough job, but you can see the place where you're going, and it's all simple to use. Okay, you have to sign that ballot in, either you or a near relative. Near relative is a definition that's very important because we've had this ballot harvesting problem in North Carolina. We're a poster child for some of that, and somebody asked that question, and we can get into it later. But near relative is your spouse, your children, your in-laws, your, that kind of thing. It is not your cousin. It is not your niece or nephew. It is close family. So, if somebody's going down the hallway and they say they're going to the Board of Election and you run back in and say, hey, take mine, that is going to be a disqualifier. So it's all due to some shenanigans that happened 2 years ago in the 9th Congressional District. So when that ballot is taken back, either to the Board of Elections now or taken back to one of the early vote sites when that starts, there's like a little log book where the person, whose ballot is it, what's their voter ID, then who is bringing it, and that person bringing it's going to have to sign. But all of that, may get loosened up a little bit, but you need to be prepared for what I just told you in case it doesn't.
Okay. What latitude do the counties enjoy versus state regulations?
The counties don't enjoy very much latitude at all. The counties are reluctant to do anything that's not in the policy manual. Now, there are some counties, this goes back to Congressional District 9, who feel like maybe Raleigh is way too far away and nobody's watching them, and they may do some shortcuts. But I think the Riot Act has been read to all of them pretty much lately, that they got to follow the state policy.
Okay, there's another question here, which I think Elaine has answered, which is watching the ballot harvesting stories on TV. What steps are taken in North Carolina to avoid such problems here? Is there anything you want to add, Elaine?
Well, that's where the witness and all of the requirements about the witness and the requirements about who can bring your ballot in, those are to prevent, those were enacted in the face of what happened in Congressional District 9.
Okay, thank you. Does North Carolina start to count mail-in ballots as they come in, or do they have to wait until November 3rd? If not, is there a willingness to change this for future elections?
Well, we don't exactly need to change it because it doesn't happen on election day. Yes, they are counted. Here's the process when they come in. They are batched, and right now they probably do it every day. But in prior years, they would do 3-4 days worth because they didn't have the volume. Everything that they do is with more than one person. There are different eyes on it so that one person could not unilaterally do something nefarious. When a batch of ballots comes in, they look at the ballot envelopes and they see, is it filled out properly? If it is filled out properly, it goes into the box that says these are good. If it is not filled out properly and it's considered a spoiled ballot, it goes into the spoiled ballot pile, and other people start working on getting those corrections made. All people have, if two people are looking at the ballots that come in and one says, oh, this one is valid, and the other one says, I don't think so, that gets into a third pile. That gets into a pile to be reviewed. The review is done by the members of the local board, which is Democrat and Republican, and they either decide that it is valid or it's not. If it's valid, it goes into the okay pile. If it's not, it goes back into the spoiled pile, and they work on getting it fixed. Okay, for the ones that passed the test and they're okay, they open those and put them through a machine in batches. They don't do them one by one as they come in. They wait until evening, and probably they're doing it now every day because of the volume. They put them through the election machine just as if you were there putting it in yourself. They do not tabulate. They are not allowed to tabulate. So they are entered, but they will be tabulated at about the time the polls close, sometime on election day. So they don't punch the button to count until election day. So we've got a pretty good system on that in North Carolina. Now, you know, challenged ballots may be decided afterwards, or those coming in, that grace period time, they're going to be out there. But I feel for the states that can't open envelopes until election day. And a lot of my colleagues are trying to get court permission or legislative permission to do just what North Carolina is doing, to separate them, and then those that are good ones, run them through the tabulator, but don't print the readout button. Just as if you were voting on election day, they don't print the readout button until the polls are closed and everybody's through.
Okay. I'm going to read the question. I don't understand it. It says, what was the substance of the change to the procedures for correcting a ballot, and why was that done?
Well, it was done because of the COVID challenges to it and the difficulty of people, and the inherent belief that if your witness messed up and put maybe an unreadable address down, that should not deny the person the right for their vote to be counted. Election law kind of leans toward the intent of the voter should be determined. And if you don't ever get to looking at the ballot because of somebody else messed up, that's pretty harsh. And so previously they were sending out new ballots. The new change allows for these affidavit forms to be available to correct. You know, as a lawyer, I did plenty of affidavits, but the average person doesn't have the, you know, the ability to or want to do an affidavit, and you probably don't want them to handwrite one, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So they're fill in the blank forms.
Okay, I think this answers the next question, but I'll ask it just in case. It says, if ballots are corrected, how do we know that there is no cheating involved in the process?
That is the hardest one for me to answer. At some point, we've just got to depend upon the goodwill of people. You know, if it's sent back out to the person and the voter's signature appears and it matches the signature on the prior time and there wasn't any problem with the voter's signature, that's a good safeguard. You know, I don't have a real good answer for that. I mean, this is human beings. I don't know that it's foolproof.
Okay, thank you. We're hearing, and you may have answered this one as well, we're hearing reports of that a disproportionate number of Black voters are having their absentee ballots returned. Can you clarify that issue? And I think you've already have, but
I've already talked about that. Yes, sir.
Okay. This one, background. In Wisconsin, the federal district judge ordered a 6-day extension for counting mail-in ballots. An appellate judge reversed that and ordered a return to Wisconsin law before that decision. Here, there is a lawsuit to reverse an agreement for a 9-day extension. What would we fall back to? What was and what is the law in North Carolina absent that agreement?
Right now, the law is that grace period expires on at 5 o'clock on the Friday after the election. The settlement of that lawsuit that's proposed, that is in question, would extend that out for another week. It would extend it to, and I wrote it down here. It would extend it out to November 12th at 5 p.m. And you know, when I first heard that, I went, my golly, that's a while. It is actually matching federal law. It is not something, the date they picked out of the sky. This is the date which overseas and military ballots that come in through, you can even fax in a military ballot, overseas ballot. That is the date that they have for the outside cutoff date. So it does make sense that the state moved it to match with that, if the judge approves.
Thank you. This is one that just might be of interest to some people. I'll read it. I have been living outside the U.S. for 25 years, having last lived in Florida. I have one child born in the U.S., age 27, who has lived in Israel since 1995. I have one child, age 20, born in Israel, who has never lived in the US except going to summer camp. Both are US citizens. Can they vote in the November election? If so, what address do I use for them? Neither have registered to vote in the United States before.
If they are over 18, which they both are, and are US citizens, they have the right to vote. Again, ncsbe.gov. There is a section for overseas citizens. It's in there with the military part, but if the person will go to the website, you will find out that they are qualified if they meet the qualifications, which would be age, except they're living outside of the country. They can register in the last place where their parent or guardian was eligible, or if they're deceased would have been eligible to vote before they left the US, assuming that is within the United States. And this person hasn't previously registered in another state, which neither of these two have. If they'd registered in Montana before leaving, then they would exercise their right in Montana. And there are two kinds of ballots that these individuals can get. I prepared for this question. Thank you for giving it ahead of time. There's a federal postcard application, which allows, it gets a ballot just like you would get it if you're living in Durham. Then there's a federal ballot where you just vote for the president and federal offices. There's also what they call a write-in absentee ballot, where it puts the burden to find out who the names are that you want to vote for on the voter. I would say that's probably a pretty hard mountain to climb if you want to vote for local offices. But if you have enough time, you can register and then get your sample ballot. And for folks here, look up your registration to make sure that they've got your correct address, and you can get your sample ballot right now. So you know if you're in a such and so congressional district or county commissioner district or school board. Each different county has different requirements. Like here in Wake County, I can vote for all county commissioners, but I only live in one county commissioner district. In some counties, you can only vote in the county commission district that you live in. So it's a real hodgepodge. But there's whoever asked this question, please go to that ncsbe.gov and then look for the overseas citizen absentee ballot section and military ballot, overseas and military ballots. It's all explained there.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into the business questions in just a minute, but a couple questions did come in related to the voting questions, so I'm going to ask those. It just came in. Is there any process for signature validation?
Signature validation is not employed in North Carolina. It has been in some states, and it has been discredited as a inexact science for it takes, what do you call them, forensic handwriting examiners for that kind of thing to be really truly accurate. And so putting that into the hands of people who are maybe even temporary Board of Election employees, because there are an awful lot of temporary folks cranking out all these ballots and getting the right ballot into the right envelope right now. So signature verification has been discredited and is losing popularity.
Thank you. During this one came in related to your response to are we reading ballots in real time, or are we waiting to the third? The question is there any risk of hacking the computer that's tabulating? So I assume you're storing them if they're being put in every day. So it's being stored, is that online, and therefore can it be hacked?
It is stored in that machine, and just like your machine on early voting or election day, it is not connected to the internet. So that avenue for hacking is not possible. There have been stories of software folks intentionally, like the companies that program these things, jimmying with it. But in all my knowledge with my colleagues, secretaries of state, none of those have proven to be accurate. And there have been a lot of court hearings on those kind of allegations.
Thank you. And then one more about signatures. Does one need to sign the exact name as it appears on the ballot? Let's say with a middle initial versus a
Okay.
middle name.
Well, your ballot's not going to have a name on it. If you signed in, I'm Elaine F. Marshall, that's my official signature. I don't think you're going to be disqualified if you just write down Elaine Marshall, if everything else matches. But if you remember how you signed in, that would be helpful. And then it's not a question at all.
Thank you. Okay, now to the business questions. What can be done to help North Carolina small businesses recover after the pandemic subsides?
That's the $64,000 question for those of you old enough to remember that. These small businesses are going to need an awful lot of help. I think PPP needs to be forgiven. Small businesses didn't even get what I consider their fair share of that. There needs to be another round, whether it's federal. It needs to be federal because the state is looking at downturn in state revenues because people are not driving, people are not outspending, people are not, there's a tax on tickets like to the movies or the museum. People aren't doing those things. We're about to go into phase 3, but that isn't going to be a great uptick. It'll be a slow, gradual uptick in our tax revenues. I think one of the more interesting thoughts about that would be like a TARP program, troubled asset relief, that we had for companies that were deemed 10, 15 years ago too big to fail, but did get in trouble, to keep them from going under and us going into a deep recession. For example, the hospitality industry would be an industry that covers a lot of small business people. Now, it also covers the airlines, it covers the hotels, but it covers the caterers, it covers the restaurant folks, it covers the tour guides, it covers Uber, transportation services, just all of those things that are tied in there. But we need to pay special attention. I mean, so much of our services and businesses are small businesses, and we've got to do something to protect them. It's a combination of state and federal resources. The state has put some in, but the state does not have an unlimited, robust pipeline of money. So, and a lot of it went for.
Let me add to that. I'm going to add to Elaine's answer. The Orange County Chamber of Commerce has done an excellent job in getting local people together to help subsidize local businesses.
Yeah.
The Durham County has, the Durham County has not done quite so good a job, but a group of people have gotten together to create a similar structure for Durham County outside of the chamber.
Well, there are nonprofits that are trying to gear up. There have been grants to lenders who are in the business of economic development, such as the Golden Leaf Foundation. You've got the Self-Help Credit Union there that has got, well, we got it all over the state, but Durham is its home base. Great contact with small business entrepreneurs. Wake County commissioners have given a grant, and the Raleigh City Council has done one specifically for small businesses within the municipal boundaries of Raleigh. So a lot of folks have stepped up to do their part. I suspect it's not overall adequate for everybody, but it certainly is a good start, and I certainly wouldn't discourage anybody from applying, or other entities for trying to raise some money to make some things happen.
Yeah, I also believe the city of Durham put in $1 million towards this fund that, outside of the chamber. Okay, next question. Does North Carolina have any programs in place to attract B corporations?
That's a very good question. The answer to that is no, notwithstanding my very, 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 very best efforts on that. We don't have a B corporation statute in North Carolina. I gathered together some of the great philanthropist leaders in this state and they went down to the General Assembly. I stayed away that day because I figured I did not need to be there. They were some of the most influential philanthropist people. And by the time the committee hearing was over in the Senate, they felt they had been beat up around the head and ears and had their hat handed to them as they went back out the door. There was absolutely no appetite to create a B corporation, or so therefore we got to have that before we get the second. There is a movement right
Thank you.
now to, instead of enacting a new statute, to make some modifications that would allow a B corporation. For those of you that are not aware, a B corporation is one that does not have to exist for totally for the benefit of the shareholders. It can exist and have one of its objectives to do good, to be a good community citizen, and that it's not a return on individuals' investment that is first and foremost the bottom line principles, which is most, well, not most, all our corporation law is that way. So, I'm hoping we will get some traction on this with a new General Assembly come January, February of next year. So I'm hopeful. I'm just hopeful on that count.
Thank you. If I've had an LLC in a different state, am I required to move it to North Carolina once I reside in North Carolina?
Well, it depends. If that LLC is doing work in North Carolina, then you do. You should be registering it here. And the process for that is to get a certificate of existence, which used to be called good standing. Folks understand good standing more than certificate of existence. And then that's not more than 6 months old. So you go to that state, say it was Virginia, get the certificate, and it can't be more than 6 months old because we'll reject it. And then you can file here, and I think it costs $50 to file to redomesticate here. So, but you call up my customer service people depending upon what the LLC does. If the LLC only owns property in Virginia and it's rents and proceeds that go into the LLC, but you happen to be here, that's not doing business in North Carolina. So you can get clarity from my call center. So it depends upon what it's doing.
Thank you. What are the procedures beyond IRS's for setting up a 501c3?
That's a little bit beyond my scope. Nonprofits are registered with us, but it's only a state level nonprofit. When somebody files a nonprofit, if they meet all the qualifications with paying their money and all the blanks are filled in the form, they are a North Carolina nonprofit, and we let the North Carolina Department of Revenue know that that's how they are registered. Now, I do have some experience in the 501c3 area, and that's a federal status and not a state status. Our interaction with that is more in charitable solicitation. I'm the charitable solicitation licensing agency for those that hire professional fundraisers to do licensing, to do fundraising. It requires a good deal of paperwork to get a 501c3 status. If you are starting a brand new nonprofit, it is much easier than if you had one and you operated and had revenues and spent money for a year or two or three before you decide you want your federal. And a lot of people find that they can't get grants because our charitable solicitation, they want to know that the donor wants to know that they are duly licensed as a 501c3, 4, 5, whatever subcategory they go under. And if you've already been in the business, it takes a lot of paperwork to show how you spent your money, how you raised your money, and they will go through your financial affairs, or at least the last time I did one, they will kind of scrutinize your financial affairs to make sure that you are not violating or have not already violated the standards of the type status that you're looking for. There are lawyers that specialize in 501c something work, and I would say that that is where you need to get your best advice on that, or go to the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. They do offer free advice on a limited basis.
Thank you. That is the end of the questions that have been submitted either through email or on the chat. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand if you have an additional question. We have no additional questions. Elaine, on behalf of all of us in Carolina Arbors, I thank you so much. Did you want to make some closing comments?
Oh, yes, I have one more thing that I would like to tell you. I talked about fake medicines, and I don't like to scare people and talk about fake things unless I can give them a remedy, a way to tell, a way to be discerning. And it bothered me for a long time when I was seeing fake stuff here in North Carolina. And you and I don't have the ability to tell, because unless it's a pretty ragged looking pill, you know, they can look like the real thing. We teamed up with the Center for Safe Internet Pharmacies. That is a foundation that has no pharmaceutical company money in it at all. It is a group of people who make their business out of electronic commerce. It is folks like PayPal, Google, Microsoft, DHS, FedEx, and then we created our own group here, which is composed of the Association of Family Physicians, the nursing hospitals, nursing programs at the community college, the North Carolina Department of Insurance, their senior information group. Let's see, who else? The Retail Merchants Association, the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, the Conference of North Carolina Council of Churches, and on and on and on. Folks who are very, AARP, very unbiased, concerned about the well-being of citizens, mostly seniors. And so they have been our allies in this. Here's our suggestion to you. If you are looking for, say, blood pressure medicine on Google and something comes up and you start looking at a website, what you need to do is to copy and paste. Take that website and copy the URL. Then go to verifybeforeyoubuy.org. Take those words and put them together. Verifybeforeyoubuy.org. I'll say it again. Verifybeforeyoubuy.org. And then when you get in there, paste in, it has a place in there for you to paste in the site that you were looking at. Don't try to write it, because one little letter off will mess it up. Copy it from the one you were looking at and then paste it in, verifybeforeyoubuy.org. And it will tell you if that pharmacy is legitimate, if that pharmacy is rogue, or if they can't tell. Only if it is legitimate should you continue to get medicine, think about getting medicine, think about giving them your credit card information and your address and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, a large percentage of what is put up as nice looking Canadian pharmacies with nice looking people enjoying life there's about 5 or 6 really bad operators who must have 25, 30 sites apiece. The federal drug agencies tell me that when they take them down, 3 more pop up. So it's like playing whack-a-mole. So the best, we just had to go do something to protect consumers. So verifybeforeyoubuy.org, and you paste in that URL that you're looking at, and it will tell you, whether you ought to go ahead or not. We have seen some gosh awful things. We have seen medicine that is formulated not the same way you would get it here. It's different dosages. They even say that. But there's no way of knowing that you're getting the right amount of the active ingredient that you're seeking. I've seen videos of pills being made in Mexico where they've used paint, highway paint, to get the nice yellow color on medicines. Well, that's lead-based paint, folks. So this is serious business. Verifybeforeyoubuy.org. We periodically run web programs, not web, Google ads, web ads on this stuff. We have had several grants from the United States Department of Justice to run this ad program, and people have clicked through and been very satisfied with what they found, and grateful that the opportunity is there. I don't have any budget at the Secretary of State for running this, so I jump on anytime there's a grant to do some renewed communication. And every time I talk to a Rotary Club or Lions Club, or which I'm not doing now because of COVID, I talk about these kind of things. I'm pretty passionate about us being safe. I mean, it's part of my job is to educate consumers about how to protect themselves.
Thank you, Elaine. Are there any other final comments you'd like to make?
Well, it's been a delight to be with you all. I've looked at some of you. I just see names for a lot of the others. I want to thank Herman for arranging this. And oh golly, who was my friend that put us in contact? Linda.
I was looking up
Linda
her name
Mobley.
because I wanted to thank her at the beginning.
Linda
Yes,
Mobley.
thank you.
Lovely. Yep. Linda and I both practiced domestic law, and I met her a long, long, long time ago. So outstanding Wake County lawyer, but now one of your, I guess, retired people there. It's been wonderful. Just about everybody stayed on, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Now, let me just add to that, and thank you for reminding me of Elaine's name. I was doing a search under your name to find the original email.
Okay. Linda Mobley.
Anyway, because here's the message. Besides thanking her for what she did, there's also a message. The club and I can use all of your help in making contacts for people like Elaine, people out of academics, whatever you think would be of interest to the community. I'm delighted to put it together, but I need help with the ideas and in some cases the connections. So in absentia, thank you, Elaine. And any of you, please get to me with your recommendations.
Well, Herman,
I thank you all for.
Feel
Yes.
free to follow up with me. I've often thought I was a matchmaker, and my chief deputy is Radar O'Reilly. He knows where everything is stored. He knows how to trade paper clips for Band-Aids and get stuff done. So we got good connections. We can help you out with some speakers, I expect.
Well, you said you were going to talk to Stein and to see if you could get us the AG on, and we have a pretty good young lady named Cohen from Westchester County. When she gets up from doing all the COVID stuff, if you could see, I'm sure there are many people who would be interested in knowing what North Carolina is doing directly from Ms. Cohen's lips. It would be really helpful if you could help us land those.
She's gotten a lot of FaceTime on TV. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
The Attorney General is going to be in the same boat that I am, though, as far as elections are concerned. So.
Yeah, well, we'll do that afterwards if he wins, and if not, well,
okay.
We'll figure it out.
Just remind me.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I shall.
Bye-bye.
Again, thank you all. I appreciate you doing it. Thank you, and thanks for attending. Bye-bye.